Now, at one point, Diddy had everything: money, power, influence, private jets, mansions, access to rooms most people never even see in their lifetime, a life most people could only dream of. But now, he's behind bars, and the real question is, what does that kind of life look like when it's gone? More specifically, how is Diddy actually doing in prison? Now, most people remember what happened. Back in September 2024, Sean Diddy Combs was arrested in a federal case involving serious allegations, including sex trafficking and racketeering. And from the very beginning, this wasn't one of those situations where a celebrity gets arrested and then quietly goes home a few hours later. It definitely wasn't that. Prosecutors allege that Diddy had been involved in a long-running operation that included coercion, abuse, and criminal activity, and because of that, they made something very clear early on. They viewed him as a serious flight risk and someone who could potentially interfere with witnesses. Now, Diddy's someone who's been rich and powerful since the 90s. For decades, he moved with real influence, and anything that came his way, it never seemed to slow him down. But this time, it didn't matter how powerful he had been. His bail was denied, not once, but multiple times. And just like that, a man who had spent decades at the top, living in luxury, throwing exclusive parties, was now partying with the inmates, sitting in a jail cell, wearing the same uniform as everyone else. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys saw parts of the Diddy documentary that came out a few months ago. And if you didn't, you might have seen a few clips from it. Particularly, there was this one moment in the documentary where Diddy was in his hotel room, visibly frustrated, raising his voice, going back and forth with his legal team. And this was a few days before he actually got arrested. In this footage, you can clearly see that this is a man desperately trying to stay in control, trying to fight the situation in real time. But looking back now, that moment almost feels like the beginning of everything slipping. Because not long after that, the situation escalated, and this time, there was no getting out of this one.
No, then you have to have a spokesman. You have to have some sort of comms to constantly be pushing that, Mark. Because you may just be the person that just does, you just may watch CNN. So you at the wrong place looking to see what the people with the pop.
After his arrest, he remained behind bars, and that was the last time he would be a free man. Eventually, Petty Cent got his hands on, this footage, right? Later turning parts of it into a documentary. And Petty Cent, not 50 Cent, Petty Cent did all of that with a big ass smile on his face. Now, while the internet reacted from the outside, Diddy was dealing with something very different on the inside. He was initially held at the Metropolitan Detention Center, also known as the MDC. And if you don't know anything about this place, that's probably a good thing, right? This isn't some quiet, comfortable holding facility. The Metropolitan Detention Center has built a reputation as one of the most criticized federal jails in the United States. Reports describe it as chaotic, dangerous, and in some cases outright inhumane. Now, when Diddy arrived here, multiple inmates at the facility had already been charged with violent crimes, including murder inside the facility. And this happened around the same time he got there. This was the kind of environment he stepped into. When people think about celebrities going to jail, there's always this idea they avoid the worst of it, that they're more protected and whatnot. And to an extent, this is true. High-profile inmates are often separated for safety, but that doesn't mean luxury, and it doesn't mean freedom, because he's still in prison, right? Because inside the MDC, where Diddy was initially held, his reality was completely different. He lived in a dorm with around 20 other men, bunk beds, shared spaces, constant supervision. His day started pretty early, around 7 a.m., following a strict routine. He had limited time to exercise, either in a small room with yoga mats, or he was allowed to play some basketball, or just hang in a shared area with a TV and a ping pong table. No internet, no Wi-Fi. His phone calls were short and monitored. Even going through evidence for his own case was restricted to certain hours on a non-internet laptop. So the man who once controlled everything around him was now in a place where he controlled nothing. Now, eventually he was transferred out of that environment into a federal facility known as FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey. And this spot was different because Fort Dix is considered a low security facility. Now, it's still prison, right? But compared to the MDC, it was a completely different environment. At Fort Dix, inmates generally have more freedom of movement. There's access to outdoor areas, more interaction with other inmates, structured programs, things like education, work assignments, and in some cases, rehabilitation. And according to multiple reports, Diddy actually transitioned pretty well into this environment. A few months ago, a photo surfaced of him, standing among other inmates, talking, interacting, and smiling. Now here's another photo. This one is way more up close. And as you guys can see, Diddy looks like he's aged a lot, like damn near 10 fucking years, bruh. In the last 2 years? Now maybe part of it is the gray hair because he wasn't allowed to dye his hair But even beyond that, if you really look at his face, you can tell something's changed. I'm sure prison will do that to you. I can't even lie, this pic is kind of funny, because here he kind of looks like one of those unlocked characters in a video game. Please tell me if I'm lying. Now, Diddy has been keeping a relatively low profile overall. I guess he's keeping his head down until he's out again. Most of you probably already know, but his verdict came in October of 2025, and he's actually scheduled to be out on April 2028. And when you really think about it, April 2028 is not that far away at all. But then again, it's not tomorrow, so I guess he got a long way to go. Now, as far as what he's actually been doing behind bars, Diddy has reportedly been participating in drug treatment programs. And that's interesting because for anyone who doesn't remember, during the trial, his legal team pointed to substance abuse as a major factor behind his behavior, even claiming he had been dealing with addiction for years. At one point, he even said he was trying to confront his drug use and anger issues. Now, whether you want to believe that or not, that's his side of the story, and I feel like it's fair to at least bring that up, right? On that aspect, interestingly enough, Diddy was actually caught with homemade alcohol inside the facility that he's currently in. Basically, he used a bunch of natural ingredients to create an alcoholic beverage, and eventually, after sipping on a little some, Diddy got caught in 4K. I do think it's fair to mention that his legal team actually stated that the rumors claiming that he was caught with alcohol were false, but I don't really know if I really believe that. And then he was also caught violating some strict prison rules. At one point, he got caught setting up a three-way call, which is not allowed in prison, because it's a way to get around surveillance and potentially coordinate things like drug trafficking or other activity on the outside. As a result of that, they then try to take away his phone privileges, meaning you're not allowed to make any calls at all after that if they take it away. I'm not sure if they actually succeeded in doing so, however. It's crazy how basic things like making phone calls aren't rights. They're privileges behind bars, and they can be taken away at any moment for any reason. Now, before Diddy was actually sentenced, some of you guys might remember that he actually spoke on kind of everything that he's been going through, and this is what he said, right? I lost my way, I got lost in my journey, lost in the drugs and the excess. My downfall was rooted in my selfishness. I have been humbled and broken to my core. This is where I think a lot of people don't fully understand what prison is like for someone like Diddy, because physically, yeah, prison is prison for everybody, right? But mentally, I would argue that it hits way harder for someone like him because he was used to a whole different lifestyle on the outside. I mean, when you're behind those walls, there's no status, no special treatment like the outside world. There are no paparazzi chasing you down the street. The only person chasing you down is probably Pookie in cell number 4, right? So there's no special treatment like the outside world. No control over your schedule. You can't just like catch a private jet. So imagine what he was used to versus where he is right now. That kind of contrast is where the real mental adjustment comes in, I'm assuming, because I ain't never been inside, right? Because it's not just about being locked up. It's about losing the identity you built your entire life around. Now, a lot of people feel like Diddy got off easy, especially considering the level of allegations that were attached to his name. And that's a whole separate conversation, but regardless of how people feel about the outcome, the reality is still this. Years of his life are gone. Time he can never get back. And what's the most precious resource that we have? It's not money. It's time, and that's something people sometimes overlook. However, when he does get out, he's still rich. Maybe not a billionaire because he lost all that money, but he's still got money, right? And then there's the reputation aspect of things, because when he gets out, this doesn't just disappear. This follows him wherever he goes, every interview, every public appearance, every move he makes moving forward. This will always be a part of his story. But at the same time, there's another side to it. Because Diddy comes from hip hop, and if you understand hip hop, you know that it doesn't always operate the same way as the rest of the world. Hip hop has always had this element of acceptance after controversy. No matter what you did, we're always going to embrace you and hug you and celebrate you, right? Not always, but most of the time. We've seen artists go through serious situations, serve time, come back, and still be celebrated by the culture like they didn't really do anything, right? Now, does that mean everything goes back to normal? No, nothing will ever be normal for Diddy. Does that mean that everyone will still support him again? No, but it does mean that his story isn't necessarily over when he gets out. Because in hip hop, redemption, controversy, and legacy are all part of the same conversation. So when you look at Diddy's situation as a whole, it's not just about how he's doing in prison physically. It's about the bigger picture, the mental adjustment, the loss of control, the time taken from his life, and the reality that even after prison, he's stepping back into a world where his position has changed. And at that point, the question won't just be, how did he do in prison? It'll be, what does life even look like after all of this? Now, as far as what Diddy's gonna do when he actually gets out, that's where things get interesting. Because before Diddy was even sentenced, there were already conversations happening about his future. At one point, his legal team even mentioned the idea of him doing something big, a huge concert in Madison Square Garden. Now, a lot of people might say there's no way he could pull something like that off anymore, but honestly, I wouldn't be so quick to say that. Because whether people want to admit it or not, Diddy built a lot of real relationships over the years he's been in the game. Not just industry connections, but relationships with artists, executives, and people who have real influence. And the truth is, those relationships don't always just disappear overnight. A lot of those people may not stand by him publicly, but behind the scenes, that's a whole different conversation. Because in industries like the music industry, support isn't always loud. People are not always going to come out and say, hey, I support this guy. But whenever you need me, I'm one phone call away. That's kind of the understanding. And Diddy has a lot of those types of connections. In the future, you're going to see people stand by him, like people you wouldn't expect to stand by Diddy, they will stand by him. And if we're being real, part of the reason Diddy was so successful in the first place was because of his ability to build and maintain his relationships. People have always said that Diddy wasn't the best rapper. However, he was the life of the party, quite literally. But at the same time, none of this guarantees anything, because the reality is his name doesn't carry the same weight it used to. So a lot of artists aren't gonna want to be associated with his name for that reason. I think Diddy's future is kind of sitting in two different places at once. On one side, you have the relationships, the history, the influence he built over decades. And on the other side, you have the damage to his reputation, the controversy, and the public perception that follows him now. And whichever one ends up mattering more is what's going to define what his life looks like after prison. So aside from looking like the unlocked character in a video game, and aside from having a long way to go till his release, or maybe not so long depending on how you look at it, I like that song, okay? I guess Diddy is doing somewhat decent in prison. He appears to be having a good time with his friends behind bars. I'm actually curious what you guys think though. If you made it this far, drop a like on this video and subscribe if you're new here. My name is Blacky Speakz. Nice to meet you. And yeah, y'all let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about Diddy's life behind bars. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace, I'm out.